The sun had begun to dip behind the horizon, casting a warm glow over our suburban Portland neighborhood. I stood at the kitchen sink, washing the dishes from dinner while my husband, Mark, settled onto the couch with a newspaper. The rhythmic sound of water splashing against porcelain filled the silence between us. It had been a long time since I felt truly connected to him, and as I scrubbed away remnants of our meal, my mind wandered to Michael's impending return. Michael was coming home after spending several years away at college. The thought stirred something within me, a mix of excitement and trepidation. I could still picture him as the boy who left for school, all wide-eyed and full of dreams. But now he would return as a man, transformed in ways I could hardly comprehend. I wondered what he had experienced during those years, what kind of person he had become. Mark glanced up from his paper. "You okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Just thinking about Michael," I replied, forcing a smile. "I hope he's doing well." "Of course he is," Mark said dismissively. "He's always been smart." As I finished rinsing the last dish, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was about to change in our lives, something significant. The air felt charged with anticipation. Yet beneath that anticipation lay an unsettling undercurrent of disconnection between Mark and me. After drying my hands on a dish towel, I took a moment to gaze out the window at our backyard. The garden was in full bloom, vibrant flowers danced in the evening breeze. But even their beauty couldn't distract me from my thoughts about Michael. In the days leading up to his arrival, I found myself daydreaming more than usual, imagining conversations we might have and how it would feel to have him back in our lives again. Would we share laughter over old memories? Would he confide in me about his life away? My heart raced at the thought of reconnecting with him. The night before Michael returned, sleep eluded me as I lay in bed beside Mark. His steady breathing was a reminder of how far apart we had grown over the years. We rarely talked anymore beyond mundane topics like bills and groceries. My mind drifted back to Michael, his boyish charm mixed with an undeniable allure that came with adulthood. When Michael finally walked through our front door, it was as if time had folded in on itself. He stood there, a tall young man with broad shoulders and an easy smile that lit up his face. My heart skipped a beat as memories flooded back, his laughter echoing through our home, his youthful energy filling every room. "Jessica," he exclaimed, pulling me into an embrace that felt both familiar and foreign all at once. "Welcome home," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. As we settled into small talk over coffee that morning, I couldn't help but notice how different he seemed, more confident and self-assured than before. He spoke passionately about his experiences in college, new friends, late-night study sessions, and adventures exploring other cities. "I missed this place," he said with genuine warmth in his eyes as he glanced around our kitchen. I smiled back but felt an unexpected flutter in my stomach, a strange mix of pride and something else entirely that made me uneasy. Over the next few days, we fell into an easy rhythm together, sharing meals and stories while Mark often retreated into his work or hobbies outside the house. The more time I spent with Michael, the more alive I felt. It was exhilarating yet terrifying all at once. One afternoon, we decided to take a stroll through Portland's waterfront park during one of its summer festivals filled with music and food stalls. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, families laughed together while children danced to live bands playing nearby. As we wandered through colorful booths selling handmade crafts and local delicacies, Michael turned to me with excitement sparkling in his eyes. "Can you believe how much this place has changed?" "It's amazing," I replied honestly as we sampled artisanal pretzels from a nearby vendor. Suddenly aware of how close we were standing together amid the crowd, his shoulder brushing against mine, I felt an electric connection spark between us that sent shivers down my spine. When we stopped for ice cream under a large oak tree adorned with fairy lights twinkling overhead like stars come down to earth, Michael shared stories from college that made me laugh out loud, a sound so foreign yet refreshing after years of silence at home. "You know," he said thoughtfully between bites of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream, "I've really missed you guys." A lump formed in my throat as emotions swirled within me, nostalgia for simpler times mixed with something deeper that threatened to surface if left unchecked. We lingered under that tree longer than necessary until dusk began settling around us like a comforting blanket enveloping two souls yearning for connection amidst life's complexities. But just then, I caught sight of Mark approaching us from afar. My heart sank slightly at being caught unaware by him after such an intimate moment shared with Michael. "Hey! There you are," Mark called out jovially as he neared us. Relief washed over me when he didn't seem suspicious or upset by our proximity despite everything bubbling beneath the surface inside me. The thrill mingled with guilt gnawing at my conscience like a persistent shadow looming ever closer each day since Michael arrived home again. As they exchanged casual pleasantries while standing just inches apart, a sudden realization hit hard. This fragile balance between familial bonds threatened everything familiar within our lives together. What would happen next? As Mark chatted away, I found my gaze drifting back to Michael. He stood slightly apart, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans, a casual stance that belied the tension in the air. The way he had filled out during his time away was hard to ignore. The boy I had known was gone, replaced by a man whose presence stirred something deep within me. "Did you check out the food stalls?" Mark asked, breaking my reverie. "They've got that taco truck we love." "Yeah, I saw it," I replied, forcing a smile. My heart raced as I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy. "We should grab some before the concert starts." "Great idea." "Michael, you in?" Mark turned toward him. "Sure," Michael said, his voice steady but with an undertone that suggested he was aware of more than he let on. As we walked toward the stalls, the vibrant colors and sounds of the festival enveloped us. Laughter and music mingled in the air, but I felt detached from it all. My mind was elsewhere, caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions about Michael and our growing connection. We reached the taco truck and ordered our food. While waiting, I couldn't help but notice how Michael interacted with strangers, his confidence shining through in every word exchanged. A pang of pride mixed with something else entirely twisted in my gut. "Here you go," Mark said as he handed me my plate. "Let's find a spot to sit." We settled at a nearby picnic table under string lights that twinkled like stars against the dusky sky. As we ate, Mark animatedly recounted stories from work while Michael listened intently, occasionally chiming in with witty remarks that made me laugh more than I intended. But as night fell and music filled the air, my attention drifted back to Michael again. He leaned closer to me to be heard over the crowd, our shoulders brushing against each other, a spark igniting at every contact point. The moment felt charged, there was an undeniable chemistry swirling between us. It was unsettling yet exhilarating, pulling at threads of desire I thought long buried beneath layers of responsibility and marital commitment. "Do you remember that summer festival when we got caught in the rain?" Michael asked suddenly, his eyes glinting with mischief. "I do," I replied softly, recalling how we had laughed and danced under umbrellas while Mark sheltered us both. "You were so determined not to ruin your phone." "I ended up soaked anyway," he chuckled lightly before turning serious for a moment. "I missed these times." His words hung between us like an unspoken truth. There was an intimacy brewing beneath our shared memories that made my heart race even faster. "I missed them too," I admitted quietly, feeling vulnerable yet strangely liberated by acknowledging this connection aloud. Just then, fireworks erupted overhead, a dazzling display illuminating our faces in bursts of color. For a fleeting second, everything else faded away. It felt like we were alone amidst an explosion of light and sound. In that magical moment, perhaps fueled by nostalgia or sheer impulse, I leaned closer to him as if drawn by an invisible force. Our lips met unexpectedly. It was soft yet electrifying, a kiss that held all the unspoken desires swirling within me since his return. When we broke apart, breathless and wide-eyed with shock at what had just transpired, guilt washed over me like cold water after warmth, sharp and shocking. How could I have let this happen? What just happened? Michael whispered hoarsely as if fearing my reaction would shatter this fragile bubble we'd created. I don't know, I stammered back, my heart pounding furiously against my ribcage as reality crashed down around us like thunder after lightning strikes. Before either of us could process what had occurred or what it might mean for our lives going forward, the moment shattered when Mark returned from tossing away our plates with a grin plastered across his face. "Did you guys see that? The fireworks are amazing," he exclaimed enthusiastically without noticing anything amiss between us. His obliviousness provided temporary relief but also intensified my internal conflict about what lay ahead. As we watched more fireworks light up the sky together, Mark's laughter ringing out against their booming echoes, I felt torn between two worlds, one where family loyalty prevailed and another where passion beckoned enticingly just beyond reach. Later that evening when we returned home, the weight of unspoken words hung heavily in our living room. I could hardly look at either man without feeling guilt clawing at me relentlessly from within. Mark settled into his usual chair while Michael retreated to his room upstairs without another word exchanged between us. A silence thick enough to cut through glass lingered long after they were both occupied elsewhere. I paced back and forth across our hardwood floors feeling trapped within this whirlwind spiraling out of control around me. Every step echoed doubts about who I truly was anymore amidst this tangled web woven from desire and confusion over familial bonds strained almost beyond repair now. After hours spent wrestling with myself, I finally decided on one last attempt at clarity before retreating to bed for some much-needed rest. I tiptoed upstairs toward Michael's room hoping for answers or at least some semblance of understanding regarding what had transpired earlier tonight. I knocked softly on his door. Anticipation thrummed through me like electricity coursing through wires ready to ignite something powerful if only given enough fuel. "Michael?" My voice barely broke above a whisper as anxiety bubbled beneath my skin waiting for him to respond. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart as I opened the door. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. Michael sat on the edge of his bed, his expression a mix of surprise and something deeper that made my pulse quicken. "Hey," he said softly, his voice low and inviting. "Hey," I replied, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. The click of the latch felt like a boundary crossed, sealing us into a space where no one else could intrude. We stood there for a moment, an unspoken tension hanging in the air. My mind raced with thoughts of boundaries and consequences, but all I could focus on was how much he had changed since I last saw him. The boy I had known was now a man, and that transformation stirred something within me that I couldn't ignore. "Do you want to talk?" he asked, breaking the silence. I nodded slowly, my throat suddenly dry. "Yeah, I think we should." As we settled onto the bed, an innocent enough choice, I couldn't help but notice how close we were sitting. The air felt thick with unacknowledged feelings. We talked about mundane things at first, his plans for college, his friends back home. But as our conversation deepened, so did our connection. "I missed this place," he said quietly. "It feels different now." "Everything changes," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "People change." He looked at me then, really looked at me. There was an intensity in his gaze that made my stomach flutter with anxiety and excitement alike. I felt vulnerable under his scrutiny but also strangely empowered. "Jessica," he started hesitantly. Before he could finish his thought, I leaned in closer without even realizing it. Our lips met unexpectedly during a vulnerable moment, a collision of confusion and longing that left me breathless. The kiss was soft at first but quickly deepened as if we were both searching for something we couldn't articulate. I pulled away abruptly, panic flooding my system as reality crashed back in around us. "We can't do this," I said firmly, though my heart betrayed me with its wild beating. "I know," he replied softly but didn't move away from me. The weight of what had just happened hung heavily between us like an uninvited guest. My mind raced through the implications. What would happen if anyone found out? What would it mean for my marriage? "I need to set some boundaries," I said finally, standing up to create physical distance between us, the only thing that might help clear my head. Michael nodded slowly but didn't argue or push back against my words. Instead, he looked down at his hands resting on his knees as if contemplating everything we had just shared. As I left his room and closed the door behind me, a rush of guilt washed over me like cold water. It was refreshing yet jarring all at once. How could I have let things escalate so quickly? My heart raced not just from fear but also from exhilaration, a dangerous cocktail of emotions that threatened to consume me whole. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Each time Michael came into view, whether during breakfast or while watching television, I felt an electric current pull between us that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just attraction, it was an undeniable connection that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. One evening after dinner, while washing dishes in the kitchen, my husband engrossed in a game on TV, I caught Michael's eye through the window as he walked past outside with friends heading to a local craft brewery for trivia night. A pang of envy shot through me. They were carefree while I felt trapped by responsibility and expectation. Without thinking much about it, I just knew I needed to breathe. I grabbed my jacket and headed out after them. The brewery buzzed with laughter and chatter when I arrived. It felt alive in ways my home hadn't been lately. I spotted Michael at one of the tables surrounded by friends. They welcomed me warmly as if it were perfectly normal for me to join them, a stepmother mingling with her stepson's peers. As we played trivia together over pints of craft beer, laughter bubbling up around us, I couldn't shake off how easy it felt to be near him again without any walls between us. Each time our elbows brushed against each other or our laughter harmonized perfectly over silly questions about pop culture or history, it ignited something primal inside me that begged to be unleashed once more. Later in the evening, when most people had moved on to dance or socialize elsewhere in the brewery's spacious interior, Michael leaned closer across the table after answering yet another question correctly, a playful grin lighting up his face. "You're really good at this," he said teasingly while taking another sip from his glass, his eyes glinting with mischief under warm lights overhead. "Years of practice," I replied lightly before adding more seriously, "and maybe some luck." He held my gaze longer than necessary before leaning even closer until our noses nearly touched, breath mingling between us like an invitation neither of us wanted to refuse anymore despite knowing better deep down inside our hearts. In that moment, the world around us faded away entirely until there was nothing left except him and me, the connection pulsating between us stronger than anything else surrounding us. Our lips met again, this time deliberate rather than accidental, as if giving into what had been building ever since Michael returned home from college months ago. But before long, reality struck hard once more when laughter erupted nearby. Voices brought back awareness like ice water splashed across heated skin, reminding us why this shouldn't happen, not here, not now. I pulled back reluctantly again, but not before catching sight of something flickering behind Michael's eyes, desire mingled with uncertainty, a reflection mirrored within myself too painfully clear now. Just then, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, someone approaching our table who looked familiar yet distant all at once. It was Brian, my husband, walking towards us with brows furrowed slightly, confusion etched across his features as he took in our proximity together. His presence shattered whatever fragile bubble we'd created around ourselves moments earlier, the warmth dissipating, instantly replaced by cold dread settling heavily upon both Michael's shoulders alongside mine. Brian stopped short, only feet away from where we sat, frozen beneath scrutiny, unable to mask what lay beneath surface interactions anymore. "What's going on here?" His voice cut through tension like glass shattering against concrete, a question filled with suspicion laced throughout each syllable spoken aloud. Brian's gaze bore into us, unyielding and heavy with accusation. I could feel the air thickening around us, each second stretching into an eternity. Michael shifted slightly beside me, his expression a mix of surprise and uncertainty. "What's going on here?" Brian repeated, his voice steady yet edged with tension. The question hung between us, a palpable force demanding an answer that felt impossible to articulate. I swallowed hard, searching for words that wouldn't betray the tangled web of emotions weaving through my mind. "We were just talking," I managed to say, my tone light but lacking conviction. "Just talking?" Brian echoed, disbelief evident in his eyes. "You two looked awfully close for just talking." His words cut deeper than I expected, a reminder of the fragile boundaries I had already begun to blur. Michael glanced at me, uncertainty flickering in his gaze. The vulnerability in that moment was almost overwhelming. He was caught between loyalty to me and the reality of his father's presence. I wanted to reach out to him, offer some reassurance that everything would be okay, but the weight of our choices pressed down on me like a lead blanket. "Maybe we should take this inside," I suggested weakly, hoping to diffuse the situation before it spiraled further out of control. Brian nodded tersely and motioned for us to follow him into the house. Inside, the atmosphere shifted again. The familiar warmth of our home felt stifling now as we entered the living room. Brian crossed his arms defensively while I stood awkwardly by the entrance, unsure how to navigate this sudden confrontation. "I'm not blind," he said finally, breaking the silence that had settled uncomfortably around us. "I can see something's changed since Michael came back." His words hit hard, they were true yet painfully vague. There was so much more beneath the surface, an undercurrent of feelings and desires that threatened to spill over if not contained. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound innocent while my heart raced in my chest. Brian stepped closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret meant only for me. "I've seen how you look at him." His eyes narrowed slightly as he continued. "It's not just maternal concern anymore." The accusation stung more than I anticipated. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment and guilt as I glanced away from him and focused on Michael instead. He stood there silently, tension radiating from him like heat waves on asphalt. "Brian," I started slowly, searching for words that could bridge this widening chasm between us all. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" he interrupted sharply. "Because it feels like there's something going on behind my back." I opened my mouth to protest but found no words came forth, only silence filled with unspoken truths hung heavily in the air around us. Michael finally spoke up then, his voice steady despite the palpable tension surrounding us. "Dad, it's not what you think." His gaze flicked between us as if seeking clarity amidst confusion. "And what exactly do you think it is?" Brian challenged him directly. "We were just catching up," Michael replied firmly but without conviction, even he seemed aware of how flimsy that excuse sounded now under scrutiny. "Catching up?" Brian scoffed incredulously before shaking his head in disbelief, his frustration palpable enough to cut through glass. I felt trapped between two worlds, one where loyalty lay with family ties and another where passion threatened everything familiar, the very foundation upon which my life had been built suddenly feeling precarious beneath me. "Just tell me what's really going on," Brian demanded again after a moment of silence stretched too long without resolution. The weight of expectation loomed large above us all. Every second felt like an eternity ticking away towards an inevitable confrontation neither Michael nor I were prepared for yet somehow both knew was coming regardless. Before anyone could respond further, a sudden vibration broke through our tense standoff. My phone buzzed insistently from within my pocket, a distraction none of us needed right now, but perhaps one we desperately required nonetheless. I fished it out quickly only to find a message from an unknown number flashing across the screen. "We need to talk about what happened last night," my heart sank at those words as they resonated ominously within me, echoing reminders of choices made without consideration for consequences looming ahead. "What is it?" Brian asked sharply when he noticed my sudden change in demeanor, suspicion creeping back into his tone once more as he took another step toward me, his presence closing in like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury upon unsuspecting victims below. "It's nothing," I lied automatically while trying desperately not to let panic seep into my voice, but even as those words left my lips, I couldn't shake off feeling their weight would soon come crashing down upon all three of us regardless. "Nothing doesn't come with such urgency," he countered relentlessly, his piercing gaze never wavering from mine even though Michael remained quietly observing from where he stood nearby, a silent witness caught up amidst chaos unfolding before him too. "I'll deal with it later," I said firmly now, attempting some semblance of authority despite knowing full well how fragile control felt slipping through fingers like sand washed away by relentless tides crashing against shorelines far beyond reach. But deep down inside, I sensed this moment would mark a turning point, irrevocably altering paths once taken together, the repercussions reverberating long after echoes faded away into silence. As tension thickened around us like fog rolling in off distant waters, I couldn't help but wonder how long until everything unraveled completely beyond repair, leaving nothing but remnants scattered across fractured foundations built upon trust now crumbling beneath weighty burdens carried alone. The air in the house felt charged, heavy with unspoken words as I navigated the narrow hallways. Each step echoed my internal conflict, a reminder of the choices I had made. Michael was in the living room, his presence both comforting and unsettling. He had become a man in my eyes, yet he remained my stepson, a line blurred by our shared moments. I paused at the doorway, watching him as he scrolled through his phone. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating his features in a way that made my heart race. It was absurd how quickly everything had escalated. Just a few weeks ago, he was a boy returning home. Now, he was someone I could no longer view as merely family. "Hey," he said, glancing up and offering a smile that sent warmth coursing through me. "Want to watch something together?" "Sure," I replied, forcing a casual tone as I stepped into the room. The television flickered to life, but my mind was elsewhere, tangled in thoughts of what we had shared and what lay ahead. As we settled onto the couch, I felt the familiar tension creeping back in. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, a message from an old friend, Sarah. We hadn't spoken in ages, her inquiry about how I was doing seemed innocent enough. Yet beneath her friendly tone lay an undercurrent of concern that made me uneasy. "Everything okay?" Michael asked, noticing my hesitation. "Just an old friend checking in," I replied dismissively, not wanting to delve into details that would only complicate things further. He nodded but didn't look convinced. "You've seemed different lately." His observation struck me like a bolt of lightning. Did he sense the turmoil swirling within me? The guilt? The excitement? "I'm just busy with work and life," I managed to say, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask than genuine emotion. Michael's expression softened as he leaned closer, his voice lowering to almost a whisper. "You know you can talk to me about anything." The sincerity in his gaze ignited something deep inside me, an urge to confide but also an acknowledgement of boundaries I had already crossed too many times. "Thank you," I said quietly, trying to keep it light while feeling heavy with unspoken truths. Later that evening, after dinner with my husband, who seemed oblivious to the tension thickening between us, I found myself alone in our bedroom. My heart raced as I recalled our moments together, laughter at the brewery, stolen glances during family dinners. Each memory pulled at me like waves crashing against a shore eroded by time and choices. I picked up my phone again and stared at Sarah's message, "You've been different lately. Is everything okay?" Was it visible? Had others noticed this shift within me? The thought sent chills down my spine. I couldn't afford for anyone to see through my carefully constructed facade. Just then, Michael texted, "Can we talk later?" My stomach twisted at his words. They were both an invitation and a warning, a reminder of where we stood on this precarious precipice we had created together. When we finally met outside on the porch later that night under the stars' muted glow, Michael looked serious yet vulnerable, a combination that made it hard for me to breathe normally. "What did you want to talk about?" I asked softly as we leaned against the wooden railing overlooking our backyard. "I've been thinking about us," he began cautiously. "About everything that's happened since I got back." My heart raced at his words. They hung in the air between us like unresolved tension waiting for release. "Michael." "No," he interrupted gently but firmly. "Just let me finish." I nodded slowly, feeling both anxious and intrigued by where this conversation might lead us. "I don't want to hide how I feel anymore," he confessed, his voice low but steady. "There's something between us, I can't ignore it." A rush of conflicting emotions surged through me, fear mingled with exhilaration, but before I could respond or even process what this meant for both of us moving forward, footsteps approached from inside the house. "Michael." My husband's voice broke through our moment like glass shattering on concrete, a harsh reminder of reality intruding upon our fragile bubble of intimacy. "We'll talk later," Michael said quickly before stepping back into shadows cast by porch lights flickering above us. As my husband emerged onto the porch looking slightly disheveled from work stress or perhaps something deeper within him, his brow furrowed with concern, I felt panic rise within me like bile threatening to spill over. "Everything okay out here?" he asked casually but with an edge that hinted at suspicion lurking beneath his seemingly relaxed demeanor. "Yeah, just talking," I replied too quickly as if trying to convince myself more than him of its innocence while avoiding eye contact altogether, my heart racing against time ticking away silently behind closed doors leading into unknown territories filled with uncertainty ahead. But then came reality crashing down, the unmistakable sound of notifications chiming from Michael's phone left unattended on the table inside, the screen lighting up revealing one single message, *, can't wait for tonight. *. My breath hitched as dread settled heavily within me. It was no longer just about feelings or desires, it was about choices made without foresight or understanding where they might lead us all. And suddenly everything felt precariously balanced on an edge ready to tip over into chaos threatening all relationships intertwined by invisible threads woven tightly around each one. In that moment standing there frozen between two worlds, the one filled with warmth and connection alongside another shrouded in uncertainty, I understood fully how fragile this balance had become. The air in the house felt thick with tension, each breath I took tinged with the weight of unspoken words. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the letter crumpled in my hand. Michael's handwriting was unmistakable, each loop and curve a reminder of the boy who had grown into a man during his time away. The letter detailed his struggles, his fears, his insecurities, and an unexpected confession of feelings for me that sent chills down my spine. I had tried to keep my distance after that night we spent together, but it seemed impossible now. My heart raced as I recalled how he had looked at me, how our conversations lingered just a moment too long. The emotional connection we shared was undeniable, but it felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm that could swallow us both whole. "Jessica?" My husband's voice broke through my thoughts, and I quickly folded the letter, shoving it into my pocket as if hiding it would somehow erase its existence. He stepped into the kitchen, his brow furrowed with concern. "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" I plastered on a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Just busy with work," I replied, hoping to deflect any further questioning. The truth was far more complicated than I could articulate. He studied me for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "All right." He turned to pour himself a cup of coffee, and I felt the familiar pang of guilt settle in my stomach like a stone. As he sipped his drink, I glanced at him, my husband of 20 years, who had always been my rock but now felt like a stranger in this shifting landscape of emotions. The thought of confessing everything was terrifying. What would it mean for our family? For Michael? "Have you seen Michael today?" he asked casually, stirring cream into his coffee. My heart skipped a beat at the mention of his name. "No," I replied too quickly. "I think he's out running errands." He raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, he turned back to me. "We should plan something as a family this weekend." A knot tightened in my chest at the idea of pretending everything was fine while hiding such turmoil beneath the surface. "Sure," I managed to say, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. After breakfast, as he left for work, I sank into a chair at the kitchen table and pulled out Michael's letter again. Each word seemed to echo in my mind. I don't know how to say this without ruining everything. The vulnerability laid bare on those pages stirred something deep within me, a longing for connection that transcended mere physical attraction. But reality crashed down around me like waves against jagged rocks. This wasn't just about us anymore, it involved lives intertwined by love and loyalty. Later that afternoon, unable to shake off the weight of indecision, I decided to confront Michael about his letter. When I arrived at the local craft brewery where he often hung out with friends from town, my heart raced with anticipation and dread. As soon as he spotted me walking through the door, his face lit up with surprise and something deeper, an emotion that made my stomach flutter uncomfortably. "Jessica, what are you doing here?" "I needed to talk," I said softly, motioning for him to follow me outside where we could have some privacy away from prying eyes. Once we were seated on an outdoor patio table under the warm afternoon sun, his expression shifted from joy to concern as he sensed the gravity of our conversation. "I got your letter," I began hesitantly. His gaze dropped to the table as if ashamed of what he'd written. "I shouldn't have sent it." "Why not?" "You were honest." My voice trembled slightly as I spoke those words aloud for both of us. He looked up then, his blue eyes searching mine for understanding or perhaps forgiveness. "It changes everything." "Yes, it does." My heart raced as memories flooded back, the moments we shared when laughter mingled with lingering glances and unspoken desires danced between us like shadows under moonlight. "Can we just forget about it?" His voice cracked slightly as if even saying those words hurt him. "No," I replied firmly yet gently, this wasn't something we could sweep under a rug anymore, it demanded attention and resolution. Before either of us could speak again, Michael leaned closer across the table, a gesture so intimate yet fraught with danger, and whispered softly, "What do you want?" The question hung heavy between us like an anchor threatening to pull us both underwater where nothing could breathe or survive amidst swirling chaos created by our choices. My voice faltered as uncertainty gripped me tightly. What did I truly want? To protect my marriage? To explore these feelings? To risk losing everything? A silence enveloped us until finally breaking when Michael reached out tentatively across the table. The warmth of his hand brushing against mine ignited every nerve ending within me, sending shivers down my spine despite knowing how wrong this all was. Then suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching behind me, followed by familiar voices laughing together. Instinct kicked in, causing both our hands to retract swiftly away from each other. Just moments before turning around, saw two friends walking toward us unexpectedly. Sarah and Tom from next door, who often joined us for barbecues during summer nights filled with laughter echoing through yards filled with memories shared over years spent living side by side. "Hey! What are you two up to?" Sarah chirped, cheerfully oblivious, while Tom raised an eyebrow suspiciously, noticing our sudden shift in demeanor, like someone had flipped a switch, plunging us back into reality where secrets lurked beneath every surface, waiting patiently until they'd be revealed. "We were just talking about plans for this weekend," Michael said, smoothly masking any traces left behind from moments shared prior. The easy banter returned almost instantly, but not without leaving traces behind, reminding me just how fragile everything truly was. As they settled down at our table ordering drinks while exchanging stories about recent happenings around town, I couldn't shake off feeling trapped between two worlds. One filled with warmth yet fraught with danger alongside another shrouded in uncertainty threatening all relationships intertwined by invisible threads woven tightly around each one. That evening after returning home, the weight pressing against my chest didn't lift nor did clarity come rushing forth. Instead, only confusion lingered, leaving questions unanswered echoing endlessly throughout empty spaces within myself, yearning, desperately searching, desperately seeking resolution. The next morning, the sun filtered through the curtains, casting stripes of light across the room. I lay there, tangled in sheets, wrestling with the remnants of last night's turmoil. Michael's revelation about moving away hung heavily in the air, a specter looming over my thoughts. He had spoken about an opportunity that could change everything for him, a job offer in another city, one he had been considering for weeks. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake my husband. The kitchen felt cold and uninviting as I poured myself a cup of coffee. Each sip was bitter, much like the reality I faced. My mind drifted back to Michael's face when he mentioned leaving. There was a mix of excitement and sadness that mirrored my own feelings. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, jolting me from my reverie. I glanced at the clock. It was still early for visitors. As I approached the door, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Opening it revealed my sister-in-law, Karen, standing there with a concerned expression. "Jessica. Is everything okay?" "I was just passing by and thought I'd check on you," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Yeah, everything's fine," I replied too quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Karen raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, she settled into a chair at the kitchen table and started chatting about mundane topics, the latest family gossip and upcoming events in town. I tried to engage, but my mind kept drifting back to Michael and our complicated situation. "Have you seen much of Michael since he got back?" Karen asked casually. I hesitated before answering. "A bit here and there." "Good. He needs some family support after being away for so long." Her words hung in the air like a weight pressing down on me. As she continued talking about family gatherings and plans for summer festivals in Portland, I felt increasingly restless. The thought of confronting my feelings while juggling familial expectations was overwhelming. It was as if every word she spoke reminded me of the fragile state of my life. When Karen finally left after what felt like hours of small talk, I took a deep breath and leaned against the counter. The silence enveloped me like a shroud as I considered what lay ahead, my marriage teetering on the edge while my heart pulled me toward Michael. Later that day, when Michael texted to ask if we could meet at our usual spot in Waterfront Park, anxiety fluttered in my chest. The park had always been our refuge, filled with laughter during festivals and quiet moments shared under its sprawling trees, but now it felt like a battleground where emotions clashed violently within me. I arrived early to gather my thoughts amidst the sounds of children playing and music drifting from nearby stalls preparing for an event later that evening. Moments later, Michael appeared looking more mature than ever in his casual attire, a stark contrast to how I remembered him just a few years ago. "Hey," he greeted softly as he approached me with that familiar warmth in his eyes that made everything else fade away momentarily. "Hi," I managed to reply as we found a secluded bench away from prying eyes. We exchanged pleasantries before settling into more serious conversation territory. "So, have you thought more about your job offer?" My voice trembled slightly despite my efforts to sound casual. Michael sighed deeply before responding. "Yeah, it's hard not to think about it." His gaze drifted toward the park's vibrant colors as if searching for clarity among them. "It could be really good for me." "It sounds like an amazing opportunity," I said carefully, trying to mask how deeply his potential departure affected me. He turned to look at me then. The intensity of his stare made my heart race faster than it should have. "But what if it means leaving everything behind? Including you?" The weight of his words settled between us like an unspoken pact filled with longing and regret. The moment stretched into silence until finally breaking as we both shifted uneasily on our seats. "Michael," I started cautiously but hesitated as conflicting emotions surged within me again, guilt mingling with desire threatening to spill over into something irreversible. Before I could speak further or even consider what more should be said between us, an unexpected commotion broke out nearby as festival-goers began gathering around food stalls setting up their booths. Laughter echoed around us, distracting from our heavy conversation while they danced joyfully, unaware of our turmoil hidden beneath smiles worn too thinly now. The noise brought some relief, yet also reminded me how life continued outside our bubble, oblivious to our struggles while we remained stuck grappling with choices that only seemed harder with each passing moment together. After some time spent lost in thought amidst distractions surrounding us, I finally spoke again. "What do you want?" Michael looked at me earnestly before replying softly, "I want you, but is it fair? To ask you to choose?" His question hung heavily between us, a crossroads demanding resolution yet fraught with uncertainty binding us tightly together despite knowing better than anyone how wrong this all could be. "I can't just let you go without saying something," he pressed on, bravely meeting my gaze directly, now filled with determination igniting something deep within myself once more. But then came another wave crashing down upon us. My phone buzzed insistently against the bench, startling both of us back into reality. Glancing down revealed an incoming message from my husband. It read simply, "We need to talk." Panic surged through me instantly. Dread washed over every inch of skin, feeling exposed under scrutiny, revealing secrets buried deep. Michael noticed immediately, the shift in energy palpable enough even amidst chaos surrounding us both, now spiraling rapidly towards unknown consequences threatening all relationships, intertwined by invisible threads woven tightly around each one. "I have to go," I murmured breathlessly, rising abruptly, leaving him behind, lost somewhere between wanting freedom yet fearing loss simultaneously. As I hurried away from Waterfront Park, the weight pressing against my chest returned anew, reminding me how fragile everything truly was, my heart torn between two lives pulling relentlessly apart, threatening all connections once held dear. As I walked away from Waterfront Park, my mind raced with the weight of my choices. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows that mirrored the turmoil within me. Each step felt heavy, laden with the realization that I could no longer ignore the rift growing between my past and present. At home, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. My husband, Tom, sat at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through his phone. I caught a glimpse of his expression, concern mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. "Hey," I said softly, trying to sound casual. "Hey," he replied without looking up. The tension hung like a thick fog in the air. I busied myself by pouring a glass of water, hoping to find clarity in the mundane act. "Did you have a good day?" he asked finally, still focused on his device. "It was fine," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced as I thought about Michael and our stolen moments together. The thrill of those encounters clashed violently with my loyalty to Tom. Tom put down his phone and looked at me directly for the first time since I walked in. "You've been distant lately," he said carefully. "Is everything okay?" Of course, I lied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. How could I explain this whirlwind of emotions? The pull towards Michael felt both exhilarating and terrifying. He studied me for a moment longer before shaking his head slightly, as if dismissing his concerns. "Okay." But something in his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. I took a deep breath and decided it was time to confront this head-on. "Tom," I began hesitantly, "there's something we need to talk about." The air crackled with anticipation as he raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "I've been feeling lost lately," I admitted, each word weighing heavily on my tongue. "Things have changed since Michael came back." His expression shifted from curiosity to guardedness. "What do you mean?" I don't know how to say this without hurting you, I continued, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. But there's been an attraction. An attraction? Tom interrupted sharply, his voice rising slightly. The tension escalated as we stood facing each other across the table. Yes, I said quickly, desperate to keep control of the conversation. It's complicated. Complicated how? He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing as if searching for answers hidden beneath my skin. I hesitated, every instinct urged me to protect him from this truth that had spiraled out of control into something unrecognizable. Michael has changed, I finally managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. He's not just my stepson anymore, he's different. And you're attracted to him? Tom's voice dripped with disbelief and hurt. I didn't choose this. My voice broke slightly as frustration bubbled over into anger. I didn't want any of this. But it happened anyway. What did happen? His tone shifted again, this time more curious than accusatory. I searched for words that wouldn't sound like excuses or betrayals but found none that fit neatly into our reality. Instead, visions of laughter shared over craft beers flooded my mind, the warmth of Michael's presence contrasting sharply against Tom's stoic reliability. We kissed. The confession slipped out before I could stop it, silence enveloped us like an unwelcome shroud. Tom recoiled slightly as if struck by an invisible force, disbelief etched itself across his features while hurt flickered in his eyes like a candle struggling against the wind. You kissed him? His voice was low now, a mix of sorrow and betrayal that cut deeper than any knife could manage. Yes. My heart pounded painfully against my ribs as shame washed over me in waves. I can't believe this. He stood abruptly and paced away from me toward the living room, a space once filled with laughter now echoing only silence tinged with betrayal. Tom. Just give me a minute. He waved me off dismissively without turning around. Every second stretched painfully long between us until he finally turned back after what felt like an eternity spent wrestling with emotions neither of us fully understood. How long has this been going on? His voice held an edge now, a mix of anger and heartbreak that twisted within me like a knife turning deeper into flesh. It started slowly, I admitted reluctantly. Shame clouded my thoughts while memories rushed forth. Moments shared during festivals where laughter mingled freely amidst vibrant colors under warm summer skies, all leading up to this moment where truth collided violently with reality itself. And you think that justifies it? His eyes bore into mine, searching for answers while mine darted away instinctively seeking refuge from their intensity but finding none available anywhere nearby except within myself where turmoil raged fiercely, still longing for resolution yet fearing its consequences looming ahead, ominously ever closer each passing second ticking relentlessly onward. I don't know what justifies anything anymore. My voice cracked under pressure as tears spilled down cheeks burning hot against cool air surrounding us both now filled only by unspoken words left hanging precariously between two lives once intertwined but now fraying rapidly apart threatening everything we had built together over years spent side by side navigating life's complexities hand in hand. The silence stretched again until finally Tom spoke softly, almost sadly, breaking through layers built up around hearts exposed raw beneath layers once concealed so carefully behind facades crafted meticulously over time spent together building trust slowly brick by brick, only now feeling fragile enough ready to crumble completely under weight borne too heavy for shoulders alone unable carry burdens meant shared instead. I need some time alone. His words hit hard, leaving echoes resonating within empty spaces where love once flourished now replaced instead by doubts creeping silently forward threatening all connections once held dear, unraveling threads woven tightly binding two souls together through trials faced bravely side by side, weathering storms together until now standing apart facing unknown futures looming ahead, uncertain paths diverging rapidly away from one another leaving only questions lingering unanswered hanging heavily above our heads, suffocating hope slowly fading into darkness. As he walked away toward our bedroom door, closing firmly behind him, leaving emptiness echoing loudly throughout house, once filled warmth, laughter, joy, shared moments, now transformed entirely into shadows, memories haunting corners, dimly lit, fading quickly, slipping further beyond reach, grasp, slipping silently away, forever lost amidst chaos, swirling around, threatening, engulf everything whole, consuming all light, leaving nothing behind except darkness, lingering, heavy, suffocating, choking, life breath itself lingering, barely alive, struggling, survive midst turmoil, raging fiercely, tearing apart everything once known, familiar, shattered pieces scattered everywhere, needing repair, desperately searching, endlessly searching, desperately seeking solace, comfort, connection somewhere, somehow amidst chaos, swirling, relentlessly threatening, drown completely. With trembling hands gripping tightly onto countertop, desperately seeking stability, grounding myself amid storm raging inside, heart pounding fiercely against chest, echoing loudly, reminding, constantly living, nightmare unfolding before eyes, unable escape, trapped within confines, own making choices made, leading here, standing alone, facing consequences, spiraling downward rapidly toward unknown future, uncertain, unsure what lies ahead, waiting patiently, lurking just beyond horizon, beckoning, calling softly, sweetly, promising relief, yet knowing full well price paid would come steeply, perhaps too steep, even willing pay willingly if only meant finding peace, solace somehow, somewhere hidden beneath layers, chaos, uncertainty enveloping entire existence, pulling ever downward, dragging deeper, darkness threatening, swallow whole, erase everything previously known, loved, cherished beyond recognition. A sudden vibration startled me from reverie, pulling attention sharply back toward reality, snapping focus firmly back onto present moment, forcing awareness return sharply, jolting senses awake, fully realizing implications, choices made, standing precariously perched, edge cliff, teetering, dangerously close precipice, ready plunge blindly forward, unaware consequences awaiting below, lurking shadows whispering softly, beckoning, enticingly promising escape, freedom, yet knowing full well risk taken far greater than imagined, perhaps even worth risking, everything built painstakingly over years spent, forging bonds, connections formed through love, trust, devotion, faith, nurtured gently, carefully tended throughout lifetime, shared together. And then suddenly realization dawned upon me, crashing down hard, splintering, illusions, shattered dreams scattered everywhere, revealing stark truth hidden beneath surface, long buried deep down inside, yearning desperately, escape, chains binding tightly around heart, soul imprisoned, longing, freedom, release, somehow, somewhere, somehow, somewhere. But then came knock, loud, firm, steady, echoing throughout house, jolting consciousness sharply awake, piercing veil surrounding thoughts, wrapping tightly around heart, squeezing tightly, crushing hope, dreams, aspirations held dear, slipping, swiftly slipping further away, beyond reach, grasp, forever lost amid chaos, swirling, relentlessly threatening, drown completely, engulf everything whole, consuming light, leaving nothing behind except darkness, lingering, heavy, suffocating, choking, life breath itself lingering, barely alive, struggling, survive midst turmoil, raging fiercely, tearing apart everything once known, familiar, shattered pieces scattered everywhere, needing repair, desperately searching, endlessly searching, desperately seeking solace, comfort, connection somewhere, somehow amidst chaos, swirling, relentlessly threatening, drown completely.